Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for another episode of The Agent Investor. The goal of The Agent Investor is to help our audience make informed decisions when it comes to multifamily and commercial property. And we do that by speaking with professionals and those who are in the space. Today we have a good friend of mine, Erik Manley, here from Connecticut. Erik is a investor, a mortgage broker, and other. So I'll let Erik introduce himself. Erik, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Brandon?
Doing good, doing good. I appreciate you jumping on and entertaining our audience today and informing our audience today. So let's start it off right. Let's get right to it. So, Erik, tell us
hmm
about yourself. How are you involved in commercial multifamily real estate? Tell us about your background.
Okay, yeah. So like when I got started, like everybody, I didn't just wake up and say, "Yeah, I want to own all these rental properties," right? So I actually went to Platt Tech and Milford as a tech school for automotive. I did that for like 10 years, and when I started doing that, everybody I was working with had like bad knees, bad backs. I think so. Here I am as like a 17-year-old kid, like basically on like an internship there, and I'm like, they're like, "You don't want to do this." So, they're like, "This is great till you're 30." And I kind of took their advice. So I was like, when I was 24, I remember just like I found bigger pockets. And I actually
Mm,
have credited to one of my good friends. His name's Ray, and he bought a duplex. He house hacked FHA, so he
yeah.
put the best 3.5%. He goes to me. He goes, "Hey Eric, you're a nerd." He's like, "Heck, figure out how I can buy my next rental without putting 20% down." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." I started Googling. I found bigger pockets, and then I was like, "Damn, I could do this." And
Yep.
then I did a 203K loan. I house hacked a duplex in Stratford, and then I got a HELOC. I flipped it, and then I pulled the equity out of that one. And I did a flip in Stratford, and then we'll get to
Hmm.
like new construction. Then I got a
Yeah.
deal on those three lots, and I spent the last 4 or 5 years building those three lots, and now I got
Oh,
four duplexes in Stratford, and I quit my 9 to 5, and now I'm a landlord and mortgage broker. So
yeah, absolutely. Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, it seems bigger pockets seems to be it's usually either bigger pockets or rich dad poor dad, a combination of both. That's everyone's story starts off, and then we all end up in the same place. So good stuff. Yeah, no. So we're gonna get right to it. I'm most interested in you is because you're one of the few people I know who've done ground up.
Mhm.
I guess residential multifamily duplexes. So first question, can you walk us through what your first, ground up duplex looked like, what that process looked like, and some of the obstacles that you encountered?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the first thing is why I chose ground up, right? So as I was saying before, so I did the house hack first with the 203K loan. And for those of you who don't know what a 203K loan is, it's FHA, 3.5% down, but they give you the money to fix it as well.
Mm,
So we did a gut rehab on that, down to the studs, everything, right? I learned a lot from that. Then I went and when I flipped the second house, same thing. 100-year built in 1900, two
hmm
family, gutted the thing to the studs, redid everything.
mm,
And at that point, that was around, I would say 2019 when I finished that. And what ended up happening was I'm looking at everything and I'm like, that's when the prices started going up over here.
mm,
'Cause I'm in, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm in Stratford, like Stratford, Connecticut. So the prices start going up, and I'm like, this thing that's I got to put $200,000 into this thing, and they want
yeah.
this much money for it. I'm like, it's gonna be. I go, I could build it for the same price, and that's pretty much how that pretty much how that happened. I'm like, for what they want for this house, and like my standard, right? Like everyone's
Yeah.
different, but like I want to go through it. I want to fix everything, and I'm getting outbid because all the other people I'm going against aren't going to do it all, right?
Nope.
So I was like, you know what? For me, I could be all in around these same prices if I built it.
Mm,
So that's pretty much how it started. And as fate would have it, I was looking for lots. I found one lot, like down in Stratford. There was a duplex lot, and I was like, "Oh, this is nice." And then, sure enough, like I was kind of finishing up the flip and everything, and put my ducks in a row. And then I saw the other lot next to it pop up on the MLS, and I was like, "Oh, now that somebody knows there's two next to them, I got to jump in on this." And long story short, put the offer in. This is back kind of where I was like, I just made a little bit of money. I had my HELOC. I was like, yeah, I'll put in the offer. And I put it in. And the guy basically said, hey, he's like, I don't have time for this. Right. Cause I lowballed him because this is 2019. You could still get away with that. Right. And
yeah.
he goes back to me. He goes, hey, he goes, I know you, because he was like an older guy. He goes, listen here, kid. He goes, I'll give you the same deal. He goes, I'm not going to waste your time. I'm going to give you the same deal that I gave the other two guys, but they're tied up on other projects. He's like, you buy the first lot, cash. He goes, and I'll sell or finance the second lot. And he goes, and I have a third lot. He goes, you just got to buy me out in 2 years. So I was like,
Mm,
oh, I guess I'm doing three. and
Mm.
that's how it started. So the main thing is zoning, right? The big thing I want to stress with everybody is you have to learn zoning in your area, right?
Hmm.
So like I'm in Stratford, so Bridgeport completely different, Milford completely different. A lot of people that they people call me all the time because again, there's like you know me for new construction. They're like, hey, I found this lot. I want to build this duplex on it, and then I'll go to look it up, and it's a single family zone, and they're like,
Yeah.
no, but there's duplexes on the street. It doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right? It just because buildings are grandfathered in, to that doesn't mean that's what you could build there. So before you waste any money and any time, first thing you're gonna want to do is learn the zoning, right?
Mm.
What you can do. So you got your because that's the thing that's funny is there's three parts to new construction here: understanding the zoning, understanding the financing,
Yeah.
then the actual construction. Everybody puts a lot of like thought into actually how to build the house. That's actually the easiest part.
Mm.
The
Mm.
financing is always the toughest, and then zoning, knowing kind of like all your upfront work. It's the zoning and then the utilities, right? So that's
Got
what
it.
they call your feasibility stuff.
So I'm gonna
So
jump in really quick and ask a question.
yeah.
So, what is the best way for potential investors or many developers to find out the zoning, requirements, regulations for an area?
So the thing that's nice is each town will have them listed, like usually on the town website. And
Yeah.
when in doubt, you can just call the zoning office, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So and like real quick. So like the way it'll be set up, like how Stratford is, and they're all different, right? But how Stratford usually is you have R1, 2, 3, 4. Those are your single family districts, right? Obviously, like the one is like the north end where you need like an acre and a half, whereas in the 4, that's the least restrictive down by the south end where you only need 7,500 square feet.
Hmm.
Now, and then you have RM1, which is multifamily, where you could build 2 and 3 families now.
Got it.
So and like I said, is you can see this all online. Like each individual town, you just Google West Haven zoning laws or
Yeah.
zoning regulations, and like I said, when in doubt, the majority of town halls are pretty. They'll tell you where to look,
Yeah.
right? If not, some towns they'll be like, "Hey, that's not my problem. Read the book." And then there's some towns where like the guy's like, "Hey, I'm not doing nothing. I'll just kill 45 minutes and BS with you," right?
Yeah. Those are the
So,
best ones, the ones where they want to
those
talk and be super informative. You're like, thank you.
and on that point, I will say too, the town that you're doing, and again, like I don't know if your audience is in a lot of different states, but in like Connecticut, we don't really have counties. Everything's by town, right?
Hmm.
So, and the town that you're in can make or break the deal that you're doing, right? Like where because if the town hall is I don't want to say pro business, right? But like pro development, where it's like, hey, you know what, pay the fees, jump through the hoops, they won't really, they'll just kind of just keep it going. Where there's other
Yep.
towns where they'll just stall the project just for
Yeah.
just because
Just
they
because they
get a kick
can.
out of it, right? So it's like if you think the difference between buying a regular house, like something that's already established and doing new construction, is the upfront timeline and the holding costs. That's
Mm.
what's going to make your project profitable or turn it into I never should have did this, right? Like
Mm.
pulling your hair out. Because if a town like I've heard like with Milford sometimes I've heard people waiting on a zoning permit for, a couple months. So
Oh,
if like in Stratford I can get a permit in 3-4 weeks and then it takes me 5 months in Milford,
yeah.
your math is a lot different,
Yeah.
So that's
Is
one
there
thing
is
to
there is there any way, not to go off topic, but is there any way to kind of get a feel for the zoning, just how fast they move between towns, or you got to kind of talk with investors in the town to see?
I try to talk to investors in the town, like that have
Yeah.
actually, and that's yeah, and sometimes sometimes there's a changing of the guard, right?
Mm.
So it's like you just talk to investors that are doing stuff in those towns, and you get an idea. Or sometimes when you call the town, you can tell whether they're warm and fuzzy,
Yeah.
or
Oh
or,
yeah.
or not, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
So, what are some of the other kind of staying on that same question?
mhm.
Some of the other obstacles when we get into that first one that you came upon.
so I had a very unique baptism by fire because I broke ground. So I had everything all lined up, and we can talk and we can go over the differences of this. So my first new construction one I did modular construction, where they build the
Mm.
house in the factory on like 4 sections, and then
Mm.
they come and set it with the crane, right? And then you finish the inside of it. Well, I had everything all set up. I had my budget, I had financing lined up. It was going to be everything was going to go perfectly to plan. And I broke ground on March 5th, 2020, and the world shut down the next week,
Mm.
right? So then I put the money for the down payment. My house was literally all the materials for my house were sitting in the factory, and all because New York shut the state down, they couldn't go to work. So
Mm.
I was paying interest on that, and
Mm.
the factory was shut down. So that
Dang.
was couldn't find pressure treat. The price didn't go up, but pressure treated. You could just. I remember me and my contractor would just go to Home Depot every morning at 6 a.m. Be like, hey, are there any? Is there any pressure treated? Right.
Wow.
It was a crazy time. And then the second one was obviously when the lumber prices went through the roof. I quoted. I finished the first one. I started it in March. I finished in November. The second one I did, I got all my started getting all my quotes in like January. So called up the lumber yard because I stick framed the second one, which I'll explain why. But I stick framed the second one, and I got my quote. So I called the lumber yard. Here it is, like to the nail, right for the
Hmm.
the framing labor package. And the guy comes back. He's like, yeah, it's like 37,000. All right, no big deal.
Hmm.
So now I finish everything. I get the refinance buttoned up to recycle my money and get it back because I burnt them. That's how I
Yep.
did it. And got the money back, bought out the second lot from the guy. And then I go to get I put the foundation in. I called the lumber yard, go to get the quote, 79,000.
Mm.
That was when the 2x6s went up to $11 a stud. So that was, I would say, the majority of it. Now, I learned a lot from when I did the gut renovations
Yep.
to where the inside of the house, whether it's renovation or new construction, is mostly the same. So,
Good.
like the thing that I tell a lot of investors that do a lot of remodels and they want to jump to new construction, the inside and then the outside of the house, like I'm talking like siding, windows, roofing, for the
Yep.
most part, that's all the same. If you're gonna make the jump, the thing that I was the most intimidated with is obviously the foundation.
Mm.
Right? You gotta dig the foundation and you gotta hook up the utilities. Right.
Got it.
So the potential pitfalls that I would say here is now first thing that you want to check is some of the municipalities. I'm in a flood zone, so I have to do them now, right? Like I just kind of got grandfathered into where I didn't have to do it. But
Hmm.
one of my friends, he just built two duplexes down the street, and they made him put the Coltex in, which is like stormwater. They're basically stormwater retention tanks. Which you have to
Mm.
bury underground to type toward put the storm drains into. Now,
Got it.
if you're not accounting for that, because on a remodel you don't have to do that, but if you're not accounting for that, that could easily be $6,000 to $8,000 right there.
Got
That
it.
you're not counting. Then on top of that, the one thing that this got me because I didn't realize it on the second house was with remodels, you don't have to do this. You have to pass an air seal test at the end, right?
Mm.
So there cannot be any drafts in the house. So your contractors that you're going to have to build this, right? And we can go, you can GC it or you can IGC myself, right?
Got it.
You got to like a lot of people they say, oh, the house has to breathe, and the house does need to breathe. But I'll
Yep.
tell you right now, you got to go through. You got to make sure you foam all these specific places, like the top plates, bottom plates. Make sure all that's set, like all the attic penetrations, because at the end, the town you're going to go to get your certificate of occupancy at the end,
Yep.
like you normally would with a renovation, and the town's just going to say, hey, I want to see your air duct leakage test, and I want to see the air tightness test, right?
Mm.
And you got to go do that. They're going to put a blower door on the house,
Yep.
and if it's not airtight enough, it ain't going to pass, right? Then you got to,
Wow.
you don't want to start ripping stuff open and caulking all
Yeah.
your baseboards and doing all that. That's a that's a pain. But
Wow.
those are two of the main things: is check for stormwater retention, and then understand that you need to seal all these drafts because otherwise
You
you're
could
gonna
be.
have to. I mean, you're gonna have to backtrack. You're gonna have to go back.
Yeah.
So I always recommend. There's a couple companies that do that. They're like the air sealing and everything.
Yep.
It's good to have them come out before you close up the walls, just so they could take because they know how what needs to be sealed, what needs to be. So like if you're, and then a lot of them will do consultations. So it'd be like,
Got
hey,
it.
you call them like, hey, I'm doing new construction. I'm about to close up the walls. I just want to just have you guys come do an inspection for like air sealing to make sure everything's good.
Yep.
So Because I'll tell you right now, it's a lot easier to do when the walls are open. Once you close the walls open, that once you close the walls up,
Yeah.
it's trying to keep everything on schedule. So,
Got it. Another question. This is a little off the script from what we had planned, but
Mhm.
what are some of the, obviously, you have an idea of some of the hard costs of the development, but what are some of the soft costs that you maybe didn't anticipate, or just what are some of those soft costs that people should keep in mind, investors should keep in mind?
okay, yeah. So, and specific to new construction, so
Mhm.
the easiest thing that you're going to do is obviously you're going to have your plot plan where you're going to put the house, how the layout's going to go, right? So in my instance, my properties are 60 feet long by 26 feet deep, right? So the first thing that you're going to do once you basically get the town signs off, you're going to call your surveyor, right? And you're going to tell him to basically pin the access or pin the box, means the same thing. What he's going to do is he's going to stake usually the perimeter of the lot, and then he's going to put two pins in the, like, okay, so let's see, here's the front of your property. It's going to put two pins here that line up with 60 feet apart, and then on the side he's usually going to put two pins over here that are 26 feet apart, so that way when your foundation guys come in, they're literally going to put their laser levels on it, shoot it across, and that's how they have the four corners, to where
Got
they
it.
actually go to dig. So the surveyor's usually like going to have to come out three times in the beginning, like I said, to stake the box, which is going to show the excavators and the concrete guy where to dig and where to actually put the four corners of the foundation. Then at the second time, and that depends like how much you need to do. If you're in a flood zone too, if you're not in a flood zone, everything's only two dimensional, right?
Got it.
Because they don't care about the elevation, for the majority of things. Whereas if you're in a flood zone, it's going to cost more because you have to have what's called a benchmark. So he's going to have to come out and establish a benchmark, is like basically a zero of like, okay, this is 5 feet above sea level. And then all
Mm,
of his elevation marks come off of that. Mine, they had to go, when I did the first house, it was like almost $2,000 for him to do the initial setting the box and then getting the benchmark, because to get the benchmark was, he had to go halfway down around the block
got
to
it.
get, but then each
Mm,
subsequent house, because he could tie into the one he did, it wasn't as bad. So you're
got it.
going to come out the first time, pin the box. If you're in a flood zone, it's going to cost more because you got to, do the elevation benchmark.
Yep.
Then before you start framing, so you put the foundation in the ground, you backfilled, you passed all your inspections. Before you start framing, you have to call the surveyor again, and you're going to do what's called a foundation as built, which that basically you do that. It's basically just a survey that shows where the foundation is. You send that into the town to zoning, and that just basically shows zoning, like your setbacks and the house is where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Because you don't want a situation where, like, I had to get a variance because I moved the house after, like I moved it
Mm,
like 3 feet over,
mm,
because my excavator and my concrete guy were like, hey, like if you move it 3 feet to the right, you could center the tree between the driveways, and it was a shorter run for the utilities and all that. And I was like, okay, well, I only need 10 feet on the side, because it used to be 15 feet in the front, 25 in the back, and 10 on each side. So I was like, okay, I still got 12 feet on the side, so I'm good. I sent in the foundation as built, and luckily it caught it because this is what it's for.
mm.
Zoning guy, he's retired now. The guy's John called me. He goes, Eric, what'd you do? Why'd you move it? I go, yeah, but I still got 10 feet. And this is a very this almost made me go bankrupt. So everybody pay attention to this. Okay. I'm like, you got to have 10 feet on the side. He goes, Eric, it's a corner lot. You have two front yards.
Mm.
So for everybody listening, that's your zoning tip of the day here. So I almost lost the house. So don't you learn by making mistakes or other people's mistakes. This is my mistake. So
Got
if you have a corner lot, for zoning purposes, it's considered, they call it dual frontage. So the front yard setback applies for
both
both sides
sides.
of the corner. So you have two front yards. So even
Got
though
it.
it was the side of the house on what I consider to be a side street,
Got it.
didn't matter. I needed 15 feet on both sides. I had to get a variance. It pushed me
Whew.
back 2 months because you had to do
Yep.
that. And luckily, I got away. It only cost me like the $500 for the filing, and I had basically
Mm.
a hung jury. I was one
Yeah.
I was one vote away from not talking to you today. So
Wow.
yes,
Cool.
it's, mhm.
All right. No, cool. All right, so we're going to keep moving on. You kind of touched on it about stick framing versus modular construction. Just summarize differences, why you pick one over the other.
Mhm. So the thing is with modular, right? And for me, it came down to cost, right? So modular has its advantages where it's fast, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is if you have very limited crew members, right? Or like if you wanted to do a house yourself, right?
Mm,
That could be the way to go, right? Now the big thing is here is it's like with anything, right? The more that you have taken off your plate, the easier it is, but then the more it
more
costs, right?
expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, though, too, time is money.
Hmm.
So, and I will say, I'm glad that I did the first one modular because, again, I knew a lot from remodeling, but at the same time, they held my hand through the process for me to like where I didn't really have to focus on the house that much. I only had to focus on learning one new thing, like the foundation, excavation, hooking up the utilities, and then they just dropped the house and I was able to go in with my guys and finish it. Now there was when I went to go do it, the best way I can describe it is imagine you hired a carpenter, a plumber, an electrician. They all started the house and then halfway through they just walked off the job site.
Mm,
And then you had to hire a brand new carpenter, a brand new plumber, a brand new electrician, and then they have to come in, figure out what was this guy's intention, how were they doing this, right? So it took a little bit longer. Now, if you're a production builder and you're doing like three or four of the same house, you once you figure you're going to waste time on the first one, right?
yeah.
But once you figure out, okay, this is how it is, this is how we do it, this is why this is, you can just go in and bang it out. So
Mm,
there is a time and a place. Now, at the time, I went so far over budget because of COVID and it's just the way it was. But because they held my hand on the first one, like they introduced me to the engineer, they helped with the designing for the architectural thing, and then I
mm,
just reused the same plans, right? Like later on, but it was very good for me to learn. And another
yeah,
thing,
absolutely.
before I forget, I would always recommend people if they're looking into like like Jay Scott, like the book on flipping houses for bigger
Yep.
pockets. He also has this small little thing called the Diary of New Construction,
Mm,
and it's a little ebook that he wrote on bigger pockets where he goes through his first new construction build and he
yep.
does it step by step. I read that entire thing, and I highly recommend. It's free. If anybody's interested, that's kind of a really good cheat sheet how to do that. Now, stick building, I went so far over budget. I basically was like, okay, I could save about 100 grand by building it from scratch. Now, the first one, I could have did it, but it would have been tough. And again, because I would have had to get the architect, I would have had to get the engineer and all that kind of stuff. So the second one was basically, I had a real bad taste in my mouth because, again, if I was stick building it, I wouldn't have to worry about if the governor of New York was going to let all the people into the factory, right? I remember sitting there watching that for like a month and a
Wow.
half. And I'm paying interest on this thing. And I'm like, nobody's answering my questions. I'm like, are we do I get my money back? Like, what's the deal, right? Like, I could have built this thing faster, right? So a lot of it for me was that I had a real bad taste in my mouth because when we were going through COVID, we didn't know are they doing lockdowns again? Is this going to happen? And I was like, I just want to, I can't have that happen again. So I was like,
Mm,
number one, I could save money by stick building. I could save about 100,000, and then I don't have to worry about like things outside of my control that I can't. Like I'm like waiting on
yeah.
somebody else, right? So that was why I went to stick building. And the thing that was funny is I saved $100,000 by stick building it, but then my lumber price went up. My lumber and electrical went up $100,000, so I had to spend the same amount. But luckily I had the cap space to do it in. So those are the main things. Now stick framing is a lot more hands on, right?
Mm,
But when I say there's like 1,000 little details and you have to watch everything, like I GC'd it myself and I have really, really good contractors, but at the same time, I don't care what anybody says, your contractors are never going to care as much as you do,
mm,
right? Like it is not like just because you hire contractors, it is not their job to make sure that like it's built like to pass. Like a lot of what I will say is a lot of really good contractors, they're really good, but I don't want to say they don't care about the new like energy efficiency codes.
yeah. They don't care.
It's your job to learn the energy
Yeah.
efficient codes and either make sure they do it or if they're giving you a really good price, they build the normal house and then you go in and do all the all that
Got
stuff, because that's how you come to budget.
it.
One thing I want to say is everybody always asks me like cost to build per square foot, right?
Yeah.
I want to let everybody know it's not a real number, right?
Mm.
Because I can manipulate that number to whatever you want, right? It's going to depend on, it is always cheaper, right? You can have a 15, let's just say you have a 2,000 square foot house, right? If you have a 2,000 square foot house, same floor, same kitchen, same everything. If it's a ranch, it's going to be more expensive than if it's a cape. Okay.
Mm.
Because the two biggest expenses when you're trying to do like as a rental or whatever, when you're spec building or you're, as a developer, you're trying to like build it and sell it for the best thing.
Yep.
The two biggest expenses is the footprint, right? So it's going to be the foundation and the roof. Okay.
Mm.
So obviously it's always cheaper to build up than it is to build out.
Mm.
So that's why where square footage doesn't really matter, right? And then it's like, okay, well, with square footage, are we counting the garage, right? Are
Mm.
we counting, you know what I'm saying? Like, are we
Yeah.
counting the basement? So it's like, and the bigger the house, obviously, like the big thing is going to be your plumbing fixtures, your kitchen, and everything. To just add extra rooms isn't that big of a deal, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, for instance, like on mine, again, with me doing a lot of stuff myself, with a 4,400 square foot duplex, I could probably build that for around $100 a square foot.
Got it.
But then now I cut that in half and I built a single family, same thing, where it's only, $2,200 a square foot. I mean, 2,200 square feet. Now I'm like 185 a square foot. So it's almost double
Mm.
the price per square foot. So it's, a lot of people get caught into that when they're like, how much does this cost? How much does it cost? And that's just for that house.
Yeah.
Like if I was to change it and do a different layout, here's the other thing: always stack your plumbing,
Mm.
right? So you don't want your plumbing running across this, running across that. Like if you can stack your kitchen, put a bathroom up top so that one drain comes down, just one, that'll make a huge difference. Uh,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
one of the key words here is, if you're working with an engineer and you're going to do this, ask them how, the key word here is value engineer,
Mm.
right? You want to say, hey, we can value engineer that. And good architects will usually know, like, okay, yeah, stack the bathrooms, like, because
Got
that
it.
makes a huge difference.
Got it. Oh,
Hmm.
cool. All right, so we're running up against time. Got a couple more questions for you. You kind of touched on it, but kind of quickly touch on the topic of financing these projects. What's, best practice in your mind?
Mhm. Yeah, so the best practices, so it depends who you're talking to, right? So, like, if it's a new person, if you can, the best way to probably do it is get like a 5% down, like conventional loan, and build it, right?
Mm.
That's what I always tell people. I go, if you can qualify for a conventional loan, you always have the best terms, right? If you can't do that, right, and to touch on that, some of those will be, they call it a one-time close, right, which is where you just get the mortgage, you don't have to refinance it, right? It'll basically, usually those are like interest only through the building period, and then
Yep.
once you get the CO, you move into it, call them, everything gets closed out, final inspections, and then it converts to your regular 30-year mortgage.
Yep.
Then if you can't do that, then you have, what I did was I had hard money, right? Because my
Yep.
DTI was so screwed up that, and at the same time, and the other thing was too, is they wanted so much money down that I was like, I was, at the time I was only like 25 years old. I was like, I don't have that. So
Yeah.
luckily I found a hard money company that would let me cross collateralize and put my
Mm.
other house that I had up as collateral. And that's how I did it. Hard money, it is what it is. It's loan shark money, right? 12%, 13% interest, 2.5 points. You got to add that in, right? Like, it's just the
Got it.
cost of doing business. And
Got it.
then, I mean, those are the two main ones I would think for the majority of people. Like, if you're a spec builder, there are some, like, you can reach out to some banks, you can get like a line of credit, a builder's line of credit and stuff like that. But
Sure.
that's for like production builders.
Yeah,
So
I'm sure as you get more experience and you level up, then it's all
mhm.
different type of financing options you have and
Yeah,
private money, all type of craziness. So,
yeah,
all right, now
exactly.
cool. I guess last question on this topic before we wrap up. What advice would you give to investors who are, looking to do this for the first time? Maybe top two, three tips you would say.
So yeah, so the main thing I would say is, number one, learn zoning, right? Because that's going to make
Yep.
or break you. And it doesn't make sense for you to spend 20 hours going over, oh, I could build this, I could do this and that, when you just can't build,
It's not allowed.
right? Yeah, you're just wasting time. Two would be, if you're used to remodeling and everything, like it's the same thing. Like one of my good friends, he just built one around the corner, and I kind of like helped him as much as I could. The only way you're gonna learn how to go to build a new house is you just got to do it, right?
Mm,
You're gonna make mistakes, and just understand that you're gonna make mistakes. There's gonna be things that you didn't see. It's not the things that you don't know. It's the things that you don't know
mm,
that you don't know, right? That
yeah.
pop. And so just make sure you have reserves. Make sure that you're like you're gonna go over budget. You're gonna
Yeah.
you're gonna go over budget. You're probably gonna take a little bit longer. Make sure that you've got the bandwidth to do that, right? Also, if you're trying to do a burr, the thing that you have to really like, which for your audience, if you don't know what a burr is, that's when you basically borrow the money and you build it, and then when it's done, put a tenant in it, refinance it. Keep in mind if you go over budget, because this happens to me every single time, if you max out all your personal lines, your business lines, all your credit cards and everything, your credit score is going to be terrible and your DTI is going to be maxed out, so you can't refinance out of the hard money loan. So
Mm.
when you're running your budget, make sure that you got the reserves and you're not going to be maxed out so you get the refinance. I guess those would be the main ones that I would say. And the same thing, read definitely if you're interested. I really recommend Jay Scott's book because it's like the Diary of New Construction because it's very straight to the point. You
Yeah,
know,
definitely. I'll make sure I post that in the notes so people
yeah.
can remember that.
Yeah, and
Oh, cool.
like I said, new construction, it's definitely a learning curve. But once you do it and you get through the first one, you won't want to do another remodel.
Mm.
It's very straightforward. It's easy to plan. Once you get through the first one and stumble around in the dark, kind of thing. So
Okay. Not cool. All right. Well, appreciate all of that good information. I'm sure our audience is going to take a ton of information back. Let's start to wrap this up. So, stepping out of new developments, new builds, when you're not building homes or duplexes, what are your hobbies? What do you enjoy doing?
it's funny, like I was saying, like I used to be a mechanic, so I used to be into cars, but since I'm engaged now, I don't do that as much. But I've been the last couple of years, I've been surprisingly getting into cooking a lot.
Oh,
You know,
nice.
I've been teaching myself to cook, so that's been real fun. So,
Yep.
but,
No, very good.
mhm.
People, how can they find you? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah,
What's the best way?
yeah. So you could either go on Facebook and you can message me, just Erik Manley, at
Yeah.
Main Street Mortgage, and either that or you can just give me a call at 203 520 3536.
Very
So.
nice. Yeah, and I'll link your contact info in the notes as well so people can find you as well. And last thing, any final words for the audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, no, like I said, me and you were talking about before, just it's a crazy market right now. Buy stuff based up buy on the fundamentals. Like if rates come down, they do. If they
Yeah.
don't, make sure that you can make that payment and just that's it. Just don't buy on speculation. Just
Mm.
play it safe and keep chugging along. The other thing I was gonna say, can we talk about the meetup or?
Oh, absolutely. I was going to say, plug in your meetup. Go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say the other way you can get a hold of me is me and my co-host Brian Almeida. We host the Milford Real Estate Investors Network. We meet at Bad Sons Brewery in Derby. It's the second Wednesday of the month from
Yeah,
6 to 8:30. And next Wednesday we got one coming up, but second Wednesday of every month, you guys come in. It's like a happy hour thing, no cost, whether you're brand new or you've been doing it for 30 years. So
absolutely. Yeah, it's a good meetup. I can attest to it. Been there, had fun, and look forward to attending future meetups with you guys. And all right, so let's wrap this up. So first off, I want to say thank you so much, Eric, for jumping on and dropping a ton of knowledge, free knowledge for our audience. I mean, that was extremely valuable. And to our audience, thank you all so much for being a part of the Agent Investor and sitting in on watching this. So we want to wish you all the best in your health and happiness. And again, thank you so much, Eric. And until
thanks for
next
having
time, we'll see you on the next one. Thank you, everyone.